Kwon Jun was not a man of warmth. He was a creature of shadow and steel, the right hand of a king who ruled an empire of secrets. His name was a whisper in the backrooms of Seoul, a name that meant silence, order, and consequence. He moved through the world encased in ice of his own making, a fortress built of discipline and duty. His hands were clean, but they directed hands that were not. His face was a mask of cold indifference, his eyes holding the flat, final stillness of a winter lake. Emotions were liabilities, attachments were weaknesses, and love was a myth told to children. He existed in a world of straight lines, calculated risks, and absolute control. He did not feel. He did not hope. He simply was. A force. An instrument. So, when his only friend, Min-jun, a man whose laughter was the only warmth Jun allowed himself, begged him for a favor, he agreed without question. The favor was absurd. A blind date. Min-jun was trapped in a family obligation and couldn't make it. Just go. Sit for 20 minutes, be polite, and leave, Min-jun had pleaded. She'll think I'm rude, but she won't be left waiting alone in the snow. Jun agreed because loyalty was a line he understood. He sat in his car across from the small, glowing cafe, watching the snow fall in thick, silent flakes. The place was an offense to his senses, all warm wood, cinnamon-scented steam, and soft chatter. It was a world he observed but never entered. He was a ghost looking into a life he was not meant to live. He checked his watch. He would give it exactly 20 minutes. He stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at his face, and walked into the warmth. It felt like a trespass. He saw her immediately. She was not the woman Min-jun had described. She was sitting at a small table by the window, a dusting of snow melting on the shoulders of her coat. She wore a simple beige shirt and blue jeans, a uniform of quiet normalcy. But it was not her that stopped the world. It was the small girl beside her, a child in a light pink dress, her face alight with wonder as she watched the snow. The woman, her mother, leaned down and whispered something, and the child giggled. It was a sound so pure, so bright, it pierced the ice around Jun's heart. He had never heard anything like it. In that moment, the feared Kwon Jun, the man of shadows, felt something shift inside him. It was not desire. It was not lust. It was something far more terrifying. It was recognition. A feeling of coming home to a place he had never been. He was supposed to meet a stranger, endure a meaningless social ritual, and leave. Instead, he saw a woman and her child, and for the first time in his life, he felt the devastating, undeniable pull of light. He was supposed to be a ghost, but he suddenly, desperately, wanted to be real. He approached the table, his steps measured and silent, a habit from a life where sound meant danger. The woman looked up, her eyes soft and questioning. They were kind eyes. He had forgotten eyes could be kind. He was used to eyes filled with fear, or greed, or calculation. Hers were simply open. Are you Daniel? She asked, her voice gentle. It was the name of Min-jun's intended date. Jun should have corrected her. He should have said no, explained the situation, and walked away. It was the logical, safe thing to do. His entire life was built on doing the logical, safe thing for his position. But the words wouldn't come. He looked from her face to the small girl, who was now staring at him with wide, curious eyes. The world of shadows and violence receded, and all that existed was this small circle of warmth in a snow-filled world. He gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. The lie was a stone dropping into a still pond, and the ripples began instantly. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that he could not walk away. He sat down, the chair scraping softly against the floor. The sound was too loud in the quiet universe he had just entered. The woman offered a small, hesitant smile. I'm Naomi, she said. And this is my daughter, Chloe. Chloe gave him a tiny wave. Hello, she said, her voice like tiny bells. Jun felt his throat tighten. He, who could command a room of hardened criminals with a single glance, could barely find his voice to speak to a child. Jun, he managed to say. It was his name. It was the only truth he offered. The date he was supposed to fake had become something else entirely. It had become the first moment of the rest of his life. The 20 minutes he had allotted stretched into an eternity. He was no longer a ghost. He was a man sitting in a cafe, pretending to be someone else, utterly captivated by a woman and her child. The conversation did not flow easily. It was a series of stops and starts, of silences that felt both awkward and profound. June was not a man built for small talk. His conversations were transactions, negotiations, or commands. He did not know how to speak of weather or books or the simple joys of a warm drink on a cold day. Naomi, sensing his reticence, did not push. She spoke quietly about her day, about Chloe's excitement for the snow, about the book she was reading. He listened. He had never truly listened to anyone before. He was always analyzing, searching for weaknesses, for leverage. But with her, he just listened. He absorbed the cadence of her voice, the way she smiled when she looked at her daughter. Chloe, however, had no such restraint. She was a creature of pure curiosity. She looked at June, her head tilted. "You're very quiet," she observed, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. June looked at the child. He had never been in the presence of such unguarded innocence. "Yes," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I am." Naomi gently shushed her. "Chloe, that's not polite, it's all right," June found himself saying. He was surprised by the sound of his own words. "She is correct." Chloe seemed to consider this. "My mom says quiet people are good listeners. Are you a good listener?" He met Naomi's gaze for a brief second. A flicker of something, amusement, surprise, passed through her eyes. He looked back at the child. "I am trying to be." That answer seemed to satisfy her. She went back to coloring on a napkin with a crayon she had produced from a small pocket. The simple domesticity of the scene was overwhelming. A child coloring, a mother watching, snow falling outside. It was a painting of a life he never knew existed. He felt like an intruder, a dark shape in a bright composition. Yet, he could not bring himself to leave. He learned that Naomi was studying to be a teacher. She worked at a local library to support herself and Chloe. She spoke of her dreams with a soft determination that he recognized, though in his world, determination was a weapon, not a gentle light. He watched her hands as she spoke, how she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Every small gesture was a revelation. He was a man who noticed details, the tell of a hidden weapon, the nervous twitch of a liar, the subtle shift in a negotiation. Now he was noticing the curve of a smile, the warmth in a gaze. The skills were the same, but the purpose was entirely different. The world outside the window was being blanketed in white, erasing the hard lines of the city. Inside, he felt a similar process beginning within him. The rigid structures of his identity, the cold certainties he had lived by, were being softened, blurred by this unexpected encounter. He had come here as a favor, a duty. He was staying for a reason he did not yet understand, a reason that felt like a danger and a salvation all at once. The snow began to fall harder, the wind picking up, rattling the cafe's large windows. It was getting late. The pretense of the date had long since evaporated, replaced by a strange, shared quiet. Naomi glanced outside, a worried line appearing between her brows. "We should probably go," she said, her voice soft. "The buses will be slow." June saw his opportunity. It was not a calculated move, not a strategy. It was an impulse, a purely protective instinct he hadn't felt in years, not since he was a boy protecting Minjun from bullies in the schoolyard. "I can drive you," he offered. The words were out before he could consider their implications. Offering help, exposing himself to a connection beyond this small table. Naomi hesitated. She was a single mother, and he was a stranger, a quiet, intense man who had appeared in place of someone else. Every instinct for caution she possessed was likely screaming at her. He could see the conflict in her eyes. He did not press. He simply waited, letting his offer sit in the space between them. He held her gaze, trying to convey a sincerity he wasn't sure he was capable of. He wanted her to know she would be safe with him. It was a profound irony. He, Kwon Jun, whose presence was a guarantee of danger, was trying to offer safety. Finally, after a long moment, she gave a small nod. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." That would be a big help. The relief that washed over him was sharp and unfamiliar. The drive was even quieter than the cafe. Chloe had fallen asleep in the back, her small head lolling to the side. The city was transformed by the snowstorm. The usual harsh lights softened into a dreamy glow. The only sounds were the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers and the soft hum of the engine. Naomi gave him directions to a modest apartment building on a quiet street. He pulled up to the curb, leaving the car running. The warmth of the heater felt like a fragile bubble against the cold night. He turned to look at her. In the dim light of the dashboard, her face was serene. "Thank you again, June," she said. She still thought his name was Daniel's replacement. The lie felt heavier now. He wanted to tell her his real name, but he couldn't. Not the full one. Not the one that carried the weight of his world. He simply nodded. He got out and opened her door, then helped her gently unbuckle a sleeping Chloe. He watched as she lifted her daughter into her arms, the child stirring slightly, but not waking. He walked them to the entrance of the building, the snow swirling around them. At the door, she turned. "It was nice meeting you," she said, a hint of a question in her tone.
He knew this was the end.
The favor was done. The encounter was over. He should get in his car and drive back to his cold, empty penthouse, back to the life that was waiting for him. But the thought of it was unbearable. He watched her disappear inside, the heavy door closing with a soft click, shutting him out in the cold. He stood there for a long time, watching the light go on in a third-floor window. He imagined the warmth inside, the quiet sounds of a mother putting her child to bed. It was a world away from his own, a world of locked doors, silent alarms, and lonely vigilance. He got back into his car, the leather cold against his skin. The ghost of her perfume, something light and floral, lingered in the air. He drove away, but he did not go home. He drove through the silent, snow-covered streets, the memory of her smile, of her daughter's innocent questions, playing over and over in his mind. They were a dangerous, beautiful intrusion, a melody he couldn't forget. His world was made of shadows, but for a brief hour, he had stood in the light. And now, he knew the darkness was no longer enough. The memory of Naomi and Chloe became a persistent hum beneath the surface of his life. It was a distraction he could not afford, yet one he could not bring himself to silence. His days were a rigid routine of meetings, reports, and the quiet enforcement of order. He moved through his world with the same cold efficiency as always, but something was different. The silence of his penthouse felt heavier. The city lights viewed from his floor-to-ceiling windows seemed colder. He found himself replaying their brief conversation, her soft voice, her daughter's bright-eyed curiosity. He had her address. It was a piece of information he should have discarded, a loose end that posed an unnecessary risk. Instead, he held onto it like a secret treasure. A few days later, driven by an impulse he didn't try to understand, he found the library where she worked. It was a small, unassuming brick building, a sanctuary of quiet and knowledge. He parked across the street, his tinted windows providing perfect cover. He just watched. He saw her through the large front window, shelving books, her movements graceful and focused. He saw her help an elderly man find a book, her face patient and kind. He saw her smile at a child who ran up to her. Each small act was a testament to the person she was, a person so fundamentally different from him and everyone he knew. This became his new ritual. He would finish his business for the day and drive to the library. He would park and watch for an hour, a silent observer of a life he had no right to witness. It was a dangerous indulgence. His second-in-command, Mr. Park, a man who had served his father and now served him, noticed the change. Mr. Park was old, his face a roadmap of loyalties and hard-won battles. He saw everything. "You are distracted, sir," he said one evening, his voice respectful but firm. They were in June's office, a minimalist space of glass and black leather. June didn't look up from the report he was pretending to read. "I am focused. Your focus has a new location," Mr. Park countered gently. A small library on the west side. June's hand stilled. He slowly raised his eyes to meet the old man's gaze. There was no judgment in Park's eyes, only a deep, paternal concern. "It is nothing. Nothing is often the most dangerous thing," Park said wisely. "A man in your position, a man who will one day lead us, cannot afford a heart. It is a liability. It creates a weakness others will exploit." Every word was true. June knew it. He was the heir to an empire built on the absence of sentiment. His father had drilled it into him since he was a boy. Attachments are anchors that drown you. Love is a weapon your enemies will use against you. To pursue this feeling for Naomi was not just reckless. It was a betrayal of everything he had been raised to be. He was a monster, a creature of the night, and she was sunlight. To bring her into his world would be to destroy her. To enter hers would be to taint it with his darkness. The choice was clear.
He had to walk away.
He had to erase her from his memory, lock her away like a forgotten file. It was the only way to protect her. It was the only way to protect himself. He sat there long after Mr. Park had left, the city lights glittering below him like a sea of cold diamonds. He knew what he had to do. But the thought of never seeing her again, of returning to the flat, gray emptiness of his existence, was a pain sharper than any blade. For the first time, the fortress he had built around himself felt like a prison. For a week, he held to his resolve. He did not go to the library. He buried himself in his work, pushing himself and his men with a renewed, cold ferocity. He was Quan Jun, the enforcer. That was his identity. That was his reality. He tried to force the memory of Naomi and Chloe from his mind, treating it like an unwelcome intrusion. But it lingered. In the quiet moments, in the space between breaths, he would see her smile. He would hear her daughter's laugh. The warmth of the cafe, the scent of cinnamon, the sight of the falling snow, it was all branded into him. He was at war with himself. The man he was supposed to be fighting, the man he found himself wanting to become. The battle came to a head on a Friday afternoon. He was driving back from a tense negotiation, his mind churning with threats and countermoves. His route took him past her street. He told himself not to turn. He ordered his hands to stay firm on the wheel, but they betrayed him. He found himself turning onto her block, parking in his usual spot across from the library, just for a moment. He told himself it would be the last time. He just needed to see that she was safe, and then he would leave for good. As he watched, a group of teenagers, loud and aggressive, congregated near the library entrance. They were jostling each other, their laughter sharp and cruel. An old woman tried to pass, and one of them blocked her path, mocking her. Jun's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He was a man who imposed order, but this was not his territory. This was her world. He was an observer, nothing more. Then, the library door opened. Naomi stepped out. She saw the situation, saw the old woman's fear.
She didn't hesitate.
She walked calmly toward the group. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady, but not confrontational. "Can you please let her pass?" The leader of the group, a tall boy with arrogance in his eyes, turned on her. "What's it to you?" he sneered, stepping into her space. Jun felt a cold rage ignite within him. It was an old, familiar feeling, the instinct to eliminate a threat. But he remained still, watching. Naomi did not back down. "She's trying to get home," she said simply. "There's no need for this," the boy laughed and shoved her shoulder. Not hard, but it was enough. It was a line crossed. In that instant, Jun's war with himself was over. He was out of the car before he even made a conscious decision, his movements fluid and silent. He didn't run. He walked. But his presence shifted the very air on the street. The teenagers felt it first. Their laughter died. They turned and saw him approaching. He wore a dark, tailored coat, his face impassive, his eyes like chips of obsidian. He did not say a word. He simply stopped a few feet away and looked at the boy who had pushed her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a threat. He didn't have to. His stillness, his absolute lack of fear, was more terrifying than any weapon. The boy's bravado crumbled. He looked away, suddenly unable to meet Jun's gaze. He mumbled an apology and herded his friends away, their retreat hasty and disorganized. The street was quiet again. Naomi stood there, shaken but unharmed. She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise and recognition. "You," she breathed. The man from the cafe, this was it. The turning point. He could nod, get back in his car, and disappear from her life forever, a silent, mysterious protector. He could preserve the distance, keep her safe by remaining a ghost. Or he could step out of the shadows. He could choose her. He met her gaze, and for the first time, He let her see something beyond the cold mask. A flicker of vulnerability. A hint of the man inside. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, still processing what had just happened.
Yes.
"Thank you. My name is June," he said, formally this time. "I apologize for the other night. My friend was supposed to meet you. I was just filling in." He was offering a piece of the truth, an explanation for his presence. "I see," she said slowly. He took a breath. The choice was made. "I was hoping," he began, the words feeling foreign on his tongue, "that I could buy you a coffee." As a proper introduction, Naomi looked at him, truly looked at him, seeing the quiet intensity, the coiled strength, and something else she couldn't quite name. A deep, profound loneliness. She should have said no, but his eyes held hers, and in them, she saw not a threat, but a plea. "I'd like that," she said. Their coffees became a weekly ritual. They met at the same small cafe, at the same table by the window. At first, the conversations were tentative, explorations of safe territory. He learned about the subjects she was studying, her passion for children's literature. He learned that Chloe was bright and funny, that she loved to draw and hated broccoli. He listened, absorbing every detail, committing them to memory as if they were vital intelligence. In return, he offered carefully curated pieces of himself. He told her he was in business, a vague field of import and export that explained his long hours and serious demeanor. He spoke of Min-June, his one friend, painting a picture of a life that was quiet and solitary. The lies were omissions, not fabrications, but they felt like a chasm between them. He was building a bridge to her, but he knew it was built on a foundation of deceit. Yet his actions spoke a different truth. He was unfailingly gentle with her.
He was always on time.
He would listen for hours without interruption, his focus entirely on her. His silence, which she had first found unnerving, became a comfort. It was a steady, grounding presence in her busy life. She started to see past the intimidating exterior to the man beneath. A man who was lonely. A man who was, in his own quiet way, incredibly kind. One afternoon, as they were leaving the cafe, she stumbled on an icy patch of sidewalk. Before she could fall, his arm was around her, steadying her with a strength that was both swift and gentle. He held her for a second longer than necessary, and in that moment, the space between them crackled with an unspoken energy. "Thank you," she whispered, her heart beating a little faster. He simply nodded, his hand lingering on her arm before he let go. It was the first time they had touched beyond a handshake, and the contact sent a jolt through him. It was a touch he had not realized he was starving for. He started to find small ways to be in her life, to help in ways that were tangible and real. He noticed her mention a wobbly table at the library where she studied. The next day, he showed up with a small toolkit and fixed it, his movements precise and efficient. She came out to find him finishing up, looking entirely out of place amongst the stacks of books in his expensive suit, yet somehow, he fit perfectly. "How did you know?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. "I listen," he said. It was the simplest, most honest thing he had ever told her. And she believed him. She began to trust him. She trusted the man he presented to her, June, the quiet businessman, the good listener, the steady presence who fixed wobbly tables and held her arm when she slipped. She didn't know that his hands, the same hands that had so carefully tightened a screw for her, were capable of signing orders that could end a man's career or his life. She didn't know that his steady presence was the result of years of disciplined, violent control. She was falling for a man who didn't fully exist. And he was falling for her, knowing that the truth of who he was could destroy everything he was so carefully trying to build. The trust between them was a fragile, beautiful thing, and he knew, with a growing sense of dread, that it was a trust he hadn't earned. The true test came unexpectedly. Naomi had to work a late shift at the library, and her usual babysitter canceled at the last minute. She was frantic, with no one else to call. As a last resort, with a hesitation that was palpable even over the phone, she asked June. She expected him to refuse. It was too much to ask of someone she was just getting to know. To her surprise, he agreed immediately, without a single question. "I'll be there," was all he said. He arrived at her small, cozy apartment, feeling more nervous than he had before any high-stakes negotiation. This was Chloe's world, a world of colorful drawings taped to the walls and toys scattered on the floor. It was a world of warmth and life. Chloe greeted him at the door, her eyes wide. She remembered him. The quiet man, she said. Naomi gave him a whirlwind of instructions about dinner, bedtime, and favorite stories. He just nodded, absorbing it all. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with her daughter. The silence that fell was immense. He was a man who commanded legions, but he had no idea how to talk to an 8-year-old girl. Chloe saved him. She took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. "Are you going to read me a story?" she asked. "Mom said you have a good voice for stories." Like a friendly bear, he let her lead him to a small bookshelf filled with picture books. She chose one about a lost star searching for its home. He sat on the small sofa, feeling ridiculously large, and she curled up beside him. He opened the book and began to read. His deep voice was hesitant at first, stumbling over the rhyming, whimsical words. He had never read a children's book before, but as he continued, he found a rhythm. He read about the little star's journey, its fears, and its hopes. He felt Chloe lean her head against his arm, her breathing growing slow and steady. By the time he reached the last page, where the star finds its place in the sky, she was fast asleep. He sat there for a long time, not moving, the weight of the sleeping child against him a profound and unfamiliar comfort. This was what it felt like. This simple, domestic peace. It was more valuable than all the money and power he possessed. When Naomi returned, she found them like that on the sofa. Chloe was asleep on his shoulder, and he was watching over her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. He looked up as she entered, and their eyes met. In that moment, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained collapsed. She saw not just a kind man, but a man capable of immense tenderness. And he saw in her eyes not just gratitude, but a dawning affection that mirrored his own. He started to become a regular part of their small world. He would bring dinner over on nights when he knew she was tired from work and classes. He would help Chloe with her math homework, his logical mind finding a strange satisfaction in her simple problems. He walked with them in the park on a rare sunny winter day. He was learning a new language, the language of family, of care, of quiet devotion. The ice around his heart was not just cracking, it was melting away, revealing something he never knew he had. The man he was in her apartment, reading stories and checking homework, began to feel more real than the cold, calculating figure he was in his other life. He was living a double life, and the strain was beginning to show. But the joy, the quiet, simple joy he found with Naomi and Chloe was addictive. It was a light so bright, he was terrified of the darkness he knew he was hiding from them. The collision of his two worlds was inevitable. It began with his friend, Minjun. Minjun saw him one afternoon, walking with Naomi and Chloe, laughing at something Chloe had said. The look on Minjun's face was one of utter shock, quickly followed by deep concern. Later that night, he confronted June. "What are you doing?" Minjun demanded, his voice tight with worry. "This isn't a game. That woman, that child, they have no idea who you are. You are putting them in unimaginable danger." June's face was grim. "I am careful."
Minjun scoffed.
"There is no careful in our world. You know the rules. You know what happens to attachments. Have you forgotten what happened to your father's associate when his family was targeted?" June flinched. He had not forgotten. It was a lesson seared into his memory. "She is different," he said, the words feeling weak even to his own ears. "They all are until they're not," Minjun said, his voice softening. "June, I am your friend. I am begging you. End this before they get hurt. Before you get hurt." The warning hung in the air, heavy and prophetic. It was a prophecy that came true less than a week later. A rival faction, seeking to test June's resolve and probe for weaknesses, made their move. They were too smart to attack him directly. Instead, they sent a message. One evening, as Naomi and Chloe were returning home, they found the entryway of their building vandalized. Hateful symbols were spray-painted on the walls, and their front door was marked with a single, dead snake, the symbol of June's clan, a message intended only for him. It was a warning. "We know where you are. We know what you care about." Naomi was terrified. She called the police, then she called him, her voice trembling. June was there in minutes, his face a mask of cold fury. He saw the graffiti, the symbol on her door, and a chilling dread washed over him. This was his fault. He had brought this darkness to her doorstep. He had been arrogant, believing he could keep his worlds separate. He had failed. He got them into his car and took them to a hotel, ensuring they were safe. He called Mr. Park and gave a series of quiet, lethal commands. The problem would be dealt with. The rival faction would regret their move. But the damage was done. The illusion was shattered. He sat with Naomi in the sterile hotel room after Chloe had fallen asleep. The silence was thick with fear and unspoken questions. He knew he could not lie anymore. He could not protect her with falsehoods. The only thing he could offer her now was the terrible, brutal truth. "Naomi," he began, his voice rough. "There are things about me you don't know," he told her everything. He spared no detail. He told her about his family, about the organization they ran, about his role as an enforcer. He told her his name was not just June, but Kwon June, a name that carried weight and blood. He watched as her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally to a horrified understanding. The man she had led into her life, into her daughter's life, was a lie. The kindness, the gentleness, it was all real, but it was wrapped in a life of violence and crime. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of profound, soul-crushing betrayal. "From the very beginning, I did it to protect you," he said, the excuse tasting like ash in his mouth. "Protect me," she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "By bringing this world to my front door? By letting my daughter grow attached to a man who is one of them?" She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself, as if to hold herself together. "I need you to leave," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. It was colder than any command he had ever given. "I can keep you safe." "No," she cut him off, her voice gaining strength. "The only way we will be safe is if you are gone. From our lives. Forever." He looked at her, at the woman he loved, her face pale with betrayal and fear. He had done this. He had broken her trust, shattered her peace. He had brought the shadows into her light and extinguished it. He stood up, the movement feeling heavy, final. He walked to the door without another word. He paused with his hand on the knob, turning back to look at her one last time. "I am sorry," he said. The words were inadequate. They were nothing. He opened the door and stepped out, the click of the lock behind him sounding like a judgment. He was back in the cold, alone. And this time, he knew he deserved it. The world June returned to was the one he had always known, but it no longer fit. The shadows felt suffocating. The power he wielded felt hollow and corrupt. He moved through his days like a phantom, his body performing the necessary functions of his role while his mind and soul were miles away, in a sterile hotel room with the woman whose heart he had broken. The fury he had directed at his rivals was swift and absolute. The faction that had threatened Naomi was dismantled, its leaders vanished. He made it clear, through a series of brutal but silent actions, that there were lines that could not be crossed. He had re-established his dominance, his reputation for cold-blooded efficiency stronger than ever. But it brought him no satisfaction. Every victory felt like a defeat. He was the king of a dead-end kingdom, ruling over an empire of dust. He was haunted by the memory of Naomi's face, the devastation in her eyes. Mr. Park watched him with a sad, knowing silence. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not need to. The emptiness in June's eyes was confirmation enough. An opportunity arose, the kind of moment his entire life had been building toward. The old head of the Serpent clan, a man who saw June as a son, was preparing for a partial retirement. He offered June control over the clan's entire North American operation. It was a kingdom. Unprecedented power, wealth, and influence would be his. It was everything his father had ever wanted for him. It was the culmination of his life's training. The old June would have accepted without hesitation. It was his destiny. But he was not the old June anymore. He looked at the offer, at the future of power laid out before him, and he felt nothing but disgust. This was the life that had cost him Naomi. This was the poison that had tainted her world. The test was clear. He could embrace the darkness completely, become the king he was destined to be. Or he could choose the light, even if it meant he could never stand in it again. He made his choice. He did not refuse the offer. He accepted it. And then he began to systematically, quietly, and brilliantly tear it all down from the inside. He used his new power not to consolidate, but to divest. He laundered the clan's dirtiest money into legitimate charities. He anonymously tipped off international authorities about their most illicit shipments. He severed ties with their most violent partners. He rewrote contracts, created shell corporations, and moved assets in a dizzying display of strategic genius, all with one goal: to create an exit, to build a golden parachute not for himself, but for the men under him who had families, who had a chance at a different life. And most importantly, to build a wall of protection around Naomi and Chloe so thick and so invisible that no one from his old world could ever touch them again. It was his penance. He was using the skills the darkness had taught him to pave a path toward the light. He knew he might never see her again. He accepted it. This was not about winning her back. This was about earning the right to have loved her at all. Months bled into one another. The winter snow melted, giving way to the tentative green of spring. June succeeded. He had successfully neutered the Serpent Clan's operations, transforming what was left into a semi-legitimate enterprise that the old guard could no longer recognize. He had built his escape route. He walked away with nothing but a small fraction of the fortune he controlled, just enough to start over. He was no longer Quan Jun, the feared enforcer. He was just Jun, a man with a past he was determined to outrun. He had kept his promise to himself. He had protected Naomi from a distance. He had arranged for her to get a grant she had applied for, one that allowed her to quit her job at the library and focus on her final year of school. He had also made sure a beautiful, safer apartment in a better school district became available to her at a rent she could miraculously afford. She would never know it was him. She would think it was luck, a fortunate turn of events. That was how it had to be. He was a ghost in her life, a benevolent force she would never see. He told himself it was enough. But it wasn't. The ache of her absence was a constant companion. Finally, when he was certain the last ties to his old life were severed, when he was sure he was no longer a threat to anyone, he allowed himself to go to her.
He didn't know what he would say.
He had no right to ask for anything. He just needed to see her one last time. He found her in a park near her new apartment. She was sitting on a bench, watching Chloe play on the swings. She looked well. She looked peaceful. The sight of her sent a wave of relief and pain through him. He stood for a long time, just watching, hidden by the shade of a large oak tree. He was about to turn and walk away, to leave her to the peace she deserved. But then Chloe saw him. Her face lit up. "June," she cried out, jumping off the swing and running toward him. Naomi's head snapped up. Her eyes widened, a complex storm of emotions passing through them. Shock, fear, anger, and something else he couldn't dare to name. He had no choice now. He stepped out from the shadows of the tree and walked toward them, his heart pounding in his chest. He stopped a few feet away from her bench. He was no longer wearing the severe, expensive suits. He was in simple jeans and a plain sweater.
He looked ordinary.
"Naomi," he said, his voice quiet. She stood up slowly, her body tense. "What are you doing here?" "I told you to stay away, I know," he said. I had to see that you were all right. And I had to tell you that it's over. All of it. I'm out." He didn't offer excuses. He didn't try to explain the things he had done for her from the shadows. He simply laid the truth at her feet. "You and Chloe are safe.
I can promise you that now.
You will never have to worry about that world again." He saw the flicker of disbelief in her eyes, the cautious hope. He had said everything he came to say. He had no right to ask for more. He gave her a small, sad smile. "I'll go now." He turned to leave, the finality of the act settling in his chest like a stone. He had taken 2 steps when her voice stopped him. It was soft, hesitant. "Chloe, she asks about you." He stopped, his back still to her. He didn't dare to turn, didn't dare to hope. "She misses the friendly bear who reads stories." He slowly turned back to face her. The hardness was gone from her eyes. The fear was gone. In its place was a cautious, fragile warmth. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. But it was an opening. It was a chance. A small, hopeful smile touched his lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The peace was not yet won. The trust was not yet rebuilt. But for the first time, the path forward was not dark and solitary. It was lit by the faint, gentle glow of a second chance.